Hello and welcome back to day 7 topics. Actually, these are the topics according to the certification MCIA certification agenda. This is actually talking about state preservation and management options. There are two ways to preserve state and manage them. One is using object stores and another is using VMQs. So the topics related to VMQs I have already discussed in day 5. Same thing actually. So I will not be talking about VMQs again. And again, object stores, how to preserve the state using object stores in detail. I have discussed in my developer training, MCD developer playlist. If you have seen, you might have seen my object store related videos. So now, what I will do is actually, it will be like a quick revision for you. I will actually add those videos in my developer training to this one. So it will be quick revision, do a quick revision and understand various state preservation and management options. So actually day 7 will be repetition of whatever I have covered about object stores in developer training. VMQs, how to actually store state using VMQs, how to share state using VMQs, we have already discussed. So let me take you to the object store related topics. Let us get started. Hello, welcome back. You are in day 10 of Mule 4 in-depth training by Shiv Prasad. Today, we are going to understand about a very important topic called as object stores. Actually, in interviews or in certification exam, there are a lot of chances of questions from this topic. So please watch this video step by step. I will try to explain the concepts clearly with examples and through code. This is going to be a little bit longer video, but just understand. It will give a good insight about Mulesoft. Okay, so let us get started. I will actually give a requirement. Let's assume that I'm creating a flow. I have HTTP listener, and I can set a variable. So I'm setting a variable by firing a query on, let us say, database. The result of database I am storing in a variable. Okay, so forget about whether it is coming from database or not. Here, assume that I'm hard coding right now. Forget about database also. Let us assume that I'm hard coding a variable. I'm creating a variable using set variable transformer, or however, I'm setting a variable x equals to 1. Fine. Whenever I set a variable, actually, where is it set? I want you to visualize a Mule event. Actually, whenever we give a HTTP request, this listener, the inbound endpoint, is going to create a Mule event object. Mule event object contains Mule message, which contains attributes, payload. This data structure is nothing but Mule message. And also in Mule event, there will be vars, which is a map. We can store any key value pairs here inside this. Now, you know that whenever a HTTP request comes, this HTTP listener is going to create a Mule event. So if I get 10 requests from 10 clients, there are 10 individual requests. So HTTP listener will create 10 individual Mule events for 10 requests. So for 10 requests, there will be separate 10 Mule events that will go through the entire flow, right? When will a Mule event be destroyed? When you give the response back, when the response is given back, the Mule event also will be destroyed. So Mule event is created whenever a request comes. In this case, right, whenever response goes back. Now, suppose in this flow, if I have set a variable x equals to something I hard coded, it will be set inside Mule event. So what is the scope of this variable? It is scope to Mule event. What is the scope of this Mule event? That means until how long will it be available or will it be in memory? Once the response is given back, it will be destroyed, right? So I can say that scope of the variable is event scope. So once the response is given, the variable also will be destroyed. The value stored inside that also will be destroyed. Oh, that is how variables behave. But now what I want is, basically variables are also nothing but stored as key value pairs, right? Variable name, variable value. So basically what I want to do is, I want to store key value pairs at application level so that I can retrieve whenever I want, whether it is in a single flow or maybe inside another flow within the same application. I should be able to retrieve it, right? So basically I need a store for creating key value pairs. Value can be any object as well. So Mulesoft provides us something called as object store. So what is this object store? You can think of object store as a map where you can store key and a value. You can think of object store as some container. No, don't think about containers in DevOps. You can just think of this as a data structure. You can think of object store as something where you can store key values. Keys will be strings and values can be any object. So how to store key value pairs inside this object store? Actually, where is this object store actually saved? The data inside object store, where is it saved? It depends. So let us see various cases. Okay. We are deploying our application inside a standalone Mule runtime. This is my standalone Mule runtime. Assume that I have deployed an application A and another application B. In application A, we are storing some data in object store. In application B also, we are storing some data in object store. Two different applications. So this object store can be treated like an object in memory. You can store key value pairs. That means object store can be of two types. One is in-memory object store, where all the key value pairs will be stored in memory within the application. Or it can be a persistent object store. If in the application A, assume that we have configured a persistent object store, whatever key value pairs you are writing, they will be stored inside some temporary file system. Okay, I will show you where they are actually stored. Okay, so if the object store is configured as in memory, the data will be stored within the JVM's memory. Of course, you know, Mule is running inside a JVM, right? Inside JVM's heap memory, object store data will be stored. If you configure object store as persistent, then all the key value pairs will be stored in a temporary file system on your server machine, wherever standalone server is running. Let me demonstrate with an example. Assume that I'll tell you a simple scenario so that I can show you a demo of how to actually use object store. So actually, to store data in object store, there is a module called as object store module. So in that module, there are components. Store is a component using which you can store key value pairs. Retrieve is a component by using which you can retrieve the value of any key. I will show you through code. So now I want to develop a simple application to demonstrate the concepts. Once you understand the concepts, I will show you where in real-time scenarios this object store is really useful. But let us try to understand the concept first. So what I want is, I will actually create two flows within the same application. First flow will have a HTTP listener mapped to /store. Whenever request comes, I'm expecting a key value pair in query parameters. Whenever request is coming, I'm expecting query parameters. Key is equals to some key, ampersand, value is equals to what? Something. So what I want to do is, I want to use the store component of object store module to be configured such that it will store a comma 1 in the object store. As I said, I want you to visualize object store is something like, so a and 1 will be stored. Okay, then I want a set payload component to just return a response saying that data is stored in object store. Okay, now in another flow, I will actually configure HTTP and let it be mapped to /retrieve. And then I will use retrieve component of object store. Okay, so here, whenever request is coming, I'm expecting a query parameter. Key is equals to what? Suppose if they pass key is equals to a, then retrieve component should retrieve the value of a from this object store and set as payload. Then I just wanted to retrieve two flows, and I'll show you how to use this store and retrieve, how the data will be saved, etc. Everything I will show you practically. Just follow. So I'm creating a new project, Mule project, object store, finish. Okay. Then, as I told you, I will drag and drop HTTP listener, and I'll rename this flow as store flow, and I'll configure this HTTP listener. Again, the good practice is to configure globals.xml, but right now I'll just create a listener here itself to save time. /store, I'm giving the path. Then I will add a module. Click on add modules. Do you see a module called as object store here? Yes, I will add this module. Do you see a component store here? Yes. So I'll drag and drop. So here it is asking for key and a value. So key, I'm expecting from a query parameter called as key. So you know the expression how to retrieve a query parameter. Attributes dot query params dot key. Can be anything, but here I'm using words key and value. And value should be attributes dot query params dot value. Okay, that's all. And I will actually drag and drop set payload and just set a payload, key or data stored in object store. That's it. Now I will drag one more flow. I will rename this flow as retrieve flow, and here I will use this listener will use same port, but path is /retrieve. Okay, then I will use a retrieve component of object store module. Then I will use a key. Here, what is the key expected? Query parameter key. So I want to retrieve the value of this query parameter. Attributes dot query params dot key. Whatever I'm expecting. So it will retrieve the value of this key. But it is possible that in object store there might not be any such key. Suppose if a request comes, key is equals to B. Right now in object store, there is no such key called as B. So whenever you try to retrieve the value of B, you may get a null. Normally, whenever we are retrieving, if it is not able to retrieve the value for this key, it will return null. But we will give a default value. Okay. So I can give anything as a default value. I can even give a dynamic expression as well. But here I'll hard code no such key, just a string. Okay, it can be any expression as well. That's all. Now I configured these two flows. Let me run this application. Then I will try to give a request. First of all, I'll prepare this URL localhost 8081/store. I want to store. Key is equals to A, and just I'll give value is equals to 1. Okay. Let us see if it is started. Yep, the Mule runtime is still starting. I'll wait for a few seconds. Okay, deployed. So now if I give a request to /store, yes, it is saying data stored in object store. I want to store one more key value pair B, and value is 2. Again, data is stored. Now I want to retrieve. So localhost 8081/retrieve key is equals to A. See, did I get value 1? That's what I stored. Key is equals to B. I got value 2. Key is equals to C, which is not existing as of now. No such key. So it is working. Now, store is a different request. Retrieve is a different request. I'm able to retrieve the key value pairs in different requests. So I can say that the object store is at an application level. Okay. But now, what if I stop the server? If I stop the server, if the object store is in memory, as I told you, there are two types, right? If the object store is in memory, the data should have been lost. If it was persistent, then even after restart, I should be able to get the values for those keys. Let us see, I stopped the server and now I'm running it again. Let us wait until it gets redeployed. Yep, deployed. Now let me give a request to retrieve the value of key A. Will I get it? Oh, I got it even after restart. So that means by default, the object store, whatever I'm using, is persistent. But where is the temporary file? I told you that it will store the key value pairs in temporary file system. Where is it? Let me tell you. Actually, once I ran it, hey, in AnyPoint Studio, do you see that Mule home is set to this directory? Inside AnyPoint Studio, plugins, and this is the home directory of the Mule runtime, which is used inside Studio. I will go there. Okay, this is a Mule runtime. Do you see that there is a .mule folder inside Mule runtime? Yes. Here, do you see that there is a folder with same as my project name? My project name or application name is object store demo. Is it there? Yes. Inside that, you can see there's a folder called as object store. Inside that, you will see lot of subfolders. These are actually called as something called as partitions. Actually, inside .mule folder, inside my application folder, inside that object store folder, data will be stored in some temporary folders here somewhere. You can see, maybe you can see inside one of the folders, you can see there is .obj. Somewhere it will be stored. So I want you to understand that if your object store is persistent and if you are running on premise, if you are using a standalone runtime, under Mule home directory, there will be .mule folder. Under this, there will be a folder with same name as application. Under this object store folder, you can see the data will be stored. Fine. Now you may ask me, hey, what if this folder is deleted? Yes, let me try to do it. I will stop the server first. Then what I'll do is I'll go to this .mule folder and delete everything right now. Okay. Now the data present in object store, the temporary file system is deleted. Now I am restarting this. So after it restarts, let us see, in this .mule folder, automatically the application folder and all should be again created. Let me just wait. Okay, the server is starting right now. See, slowly under .mule folder, these subfolders will be created. Just wait. Hey, there's a project, there's a folder object store demo. It got recreated. Previously, it was deleted and then now recreated. Fine. Let it start. Yeah, deployed. Now, as this folder was recreated, the previous data should have been lost. If I try to retrieve the value of this key, no such key, because the object store data was deleted. So now you understood clearly that if object store is persistent, then the data will be stored in temporary file system. Now you might ask me, hey, how do I create a in-memory object store? Let us see how to create a in-memory object store. Okay, let me stop this right now. Actually, for this store component, if you see at the bottom, there is something called as object store configuration. So I can click on plus and configure object store configuration. Okay, now I can give name to my object store. I can configure this. Let us say I'll give a name as my object store. Okay, here there's a checkbox persistent. If I uncheck it, that means this object store is in memory. And there are a lot of other configurations I will tell you. Okay, I'll just click on OK right now. I deselected. This is nothing but a in-memory object store right now. Okay, so now I configured my store to point to my own object store. You can see this is my object store which I created. Similarly, the retrieve component also, I can make it to point to this object store. Earlier, I didn't configure my own object store configuration, right? That means if you don't configure any object store configuration, Mule runtime level, for every application, there will be a default object store. And remember this for interview purpose or for certification purpose. The default object store, which is actually created by Mule runtime, that is a persistent object store. That is the reason why earlier, when I didn't configure my own object store, even if I restarted, you saw that the values were there, right? So now I configured my own object store, and my own object store, I made it as in memory. I unchecked this persistent. Okay. So now let us see the behavior. I will run it right now freshly. Okay. The application is deployed. Now freshly what I will do is I'll store a key value pair. I'll give a request to /store. Let's see, I'll give the value of A as 1. And here's A1 I gave, fine. Or even if I give a request again as 1, the value will be overwritten, okay? Fine. Again, I'll give B and the value is 2. Fine. So 2 key value pairs. Now if I try to retrieve the value of A, 1, because it is in memory and my application is still running. Now let me stop and restart. As I configured my object store to be in memory, the data should have been lost after restart. Let us see. Okay, so the application got deployed now. Let us see. I'll give a request to retrieve the value of key A. No such key because it was in memory and it was deleted. Fine. Now, let me tell you about this configuration here. When I make object store as in memory, there might be some problems. As everything is stored in memory, if you store a lot of key value pairs and if the values are bigger values, you may get out of memory because everything is stored in memory, right? So especially when you configure object store as in memory, you can configure what are the maximum number of entries that can be stored in object store. Suppose if I say 100, only 100 key value pairs will be stored in object store. If you try to store 101 element, the previous data in object store might get removed. The previous, maybe the first entry or second entry, that might be removed. Okay. So maximum entries is very important whenever you are using object store to make sure that you will not get out of memory. You have to configure what are the maximum entries in object store. Fine. What is the time to live? Time to live is, suppose in object store, you added an entry key value pair. And if that key value pair is not being retrieved for, let us say, 5 minutes or 1 minute, you don't want it to be lying in memory. You want it to be removed from object store. So you can configure the time to live, TTL, time to live. Suppose if I say 60 and the unit is 60 seconds, that means if a entry in object store is lying there without being retrieved or without being used for 60 seconds, it will be evicted. It should be evicted from the object store. And what is this expiration interval? So every key object store, whatever data we store inside it, once it is created, after every 1 hour, I want it to expire. That means all the entries, all the key value pairs in this object store should expire after every 1 hour. Like that, we can configure this object store. This makes sense mostly when you are having a in-memory object store. Okay, so that is the configuration. Fine. Now, I want to actually go with defaults. I'll cancel this. And now I want to make this as persistent object store. Fine. And I will restart it. Okay. So I made my object store also as persistent. Then let me restart it. Actually, what I wanted you to understand is inside .mule folder, the key value pairs will be stored. So even after restart, if I configure my object store as persistent, even after restart, the data will not be deleted. That's good for production, but whenever I am doing development, I'm testing for multiple scenarios, right? So what I might want to do is whenever I'm restarting my server, after doing some code changes, whenever I'm restarting my server, what I want is I want the data in persistent object store to be deleted. So what I can do, I can actually go to this .mule folder and delete this object store demo folder. So whatever data is there in persistent object store will be removed, and maybe I can do my testing. But again, it is really painful. I have to find out the Mule home directory, go there and manually delete it. Oh, why can't it be automatically deleted through Studio itself whenever I'm running? So what I can do, this is very important, please listen. We need to do it during development. Actually, while deploying, there's an option to tell to Anypoint Studio to delete any persistent object store. So what I can do, right click, run as. Normally we select run as Mule application, but we have to select run as Mule application configure. And if I come down here, there is an option, clear application data. By default, it is never. So the application data present inside .mule folder will never be deleted. But during development, I want Anypoint Studio to prompt me whether to delete or not, then I will decide. So I selected prompt, apply, and run now. Let us see now, whenever I am restarting, it should prompt me now. Yes, see, it is prompting me. Do you want to clear application data? Yes. If I say yes, this folder should be deleted and recreated. Okay, let us check. I said yes. See, it got deleted. And during deployment, again, it will be recreated. So in Anypoint Studio, whenever you are developing and testing, so during redeployment, you want the previous data to be removed, the previous persistent data to be removed. So you can configure it, right? So in this lecture till now, you understood how we can actually store key value pairs in object store using store and how to retrieve. There are other components also like retrieve all. If I just drag and drop retrieve all instead of retrieve, see what is this retrieve doing? It is retrieving only value of a given key. But retrieve all means it will retrieve all key value pairs. See, retrieve all key value pairs in object store. Retrieve all keys will give you only all keys. Remove will actually remove a key. If you give a key, it will remove. Clear means the entire object store will be cleared. So by seeing the names itself, you can understand what these are doing. Okay. So now let me tell you one important thing. What if I deploy this in Cloud Hub? That's a very important interview question. How object stores behave in Cloud Hub. So actually, if I deploy to Cloud Hub, as we understood about Cloud Hub, whenever I deploy my application, a virtual machine will be created on AWS. And inside that, our application will be running. The key value pairs will be stored in this machine only, the key value pairs. If the object store is persistent, the key value pairs also will be stored in the temporary file system of this virtual machine only. Now, what if this application gets restarted? The VM will be destroyed. A new virtual machine will be created and application will start here. But what about this object store data which was persistent? This is lost, is it? Yes. So there is a problem in Cloud Hub. So what will happen actually in Cloud Hub? Let me tell you. In Cloud Hub, whenever you deploy your application, there is an option which we have to select. So actually on Cloud Hub, the data will not be stored in the temporary file system of this VM. Actually, in any point platform, there are a lot of REST APIs. Let me go to Google and search for any point platform developer portal. Here, this will take me to the developer portal, this link. I'll go to developer portal. Oh, not this, sorry. I think, yes, this is the developer portal URL. No. Okay, sorry, this is not the one. Any point platform developer portal. Let me again just check. Public portal, I'll select. Here, I guess, here is a link to developer portal or public portal. This is a URL. Now, you can see that in public portal, this is the Mulesoft developer public portal. There are a lot of REST APIs. There are a lot of REST APIs. And there is one REST API called as Object Store Service V2. This is a REST API, Object Store Service V2. Actually, inside any point platform, on the any point platform cloud, there is one service running called as Object Store Service V2. V2 stands for version 2. Actually, in Mule 4, we use V2. When in Mule 3, in earlier version of Mule 3, there was V1 as well. But in Mule 4, remember that we use only V2. V1 cannot be used with Mule 4. So in interviews, they may ask, what is the difference between V1 and V2? Object Store Service V1 and V2. The difference is in Mule 4, Object Store V2 is only configured. Okay. So there is a service running Object Store Service V2. Yeah. So fine. Now, actually, in your application, if you are using Object Store component, whatever data we are actually storing in Object Store, that will be sent to this REST API. This REST API internally will store the data. So on Cloud Hub, if you are storing some data in Object Store or retrieving some data in Object Store, the Mule runtime will internally make calls to this REST API and then store the data or retrieve the data. So the data, whatever is stored, is external to the virtual machine. So even if the virtual machine crashes and if the application is restarted, no problem. Again, this will fetch from the Object Store Service V2. So remember, whenever you are deploying your application only on Cloud Hub, you need to make sure, you need to understand that the data is stored in Object Store Service V2. Okay. Now, let me actually show you by actually log into my Anypoint platform, anypoint.mulesoft.com. I'll try to log in. Actually, while deploying, I'll go to Runtime Manager. You need to understand this thing. While deploying any application, see, I can select to deploy to Cloud Hub. Now, there's an option here, use Object Store V2. This has to be selected whenever you are deploying to Cloud Hub. Then only If you are using any object store connector or any component, if it is trying to store key value pairs in object store, if you select this use object store v2, then only the data will be stored in object store v2. Otherwise, by default, it will behave like in-memory object store. Okay, that is very important for a certification exam or interview. If you don't select it, that means even though in your code you have configured the object store as persistent, it will behave as um, in-memory object store. Okay. So there is a documentation actually. This is, I just Googled for object store in Cloud Hub. And here is the first link which comes up with an explanation of different types of object store explained here. In this document, I highly recommend all of you to go through this URL. Just search for object store in Cloud Hub and take this URL, different types of object store. Here is a documentation which is explaining 3 types of object store. Any point object store v2, this is the one which we use in Mule 4. v1 was called as Cloud Hub object store v1. This is the one which is used in Mule 3. And for on-premise systems, they call it as Mule object store. Whatever I explained about object store v2, right? And actually, importantly, I want you to understand that whenever you are using object store v2, the default TTL is 30 days. Hey, when you are configuring your own object store in the global element, let me show you. Here, do you remember I told you about TTL, expiration interval and all? When you are deploying to Cloud Hub, the values, whatever you configured, will be ignored. The time to live is 30 days and extended by 30 days if accessed. This is actually according to the documentation, right? So some Mule runtimes have ability to configure custom time to live period. So there is some documentation if you want to customize it. But if you are using defaults in object store v2, these are the limits, right? And remember, the max value size in object store v2 is 10 MB. Okay, so I highly recommend you to go through the limitations. It is saying distributed locking capability is not available in Cloud Hub. That means if you have deployed your application on multiple workers and if you're getting highly concurrent requests, right? If 2 requests are trying to change the value of same key, right? Normally for concurrency, we use something called as locking. Remember, for object store v2, distributed locking capability is not available. I highly recommend you to go through this explanation about object store v1, Mule object store, etc. Right? So please, after watching this video, please go through it. Okay. So in my next lecture, I'll explain you the practical uses of object store. Right now, you just understood how object store works in various scenarios in on-premise and on Cloud Hub. But in my next lecture, you will see how practically object store is used in various scenarios. But that is also very important. So watch the next video and understand it. So in the next video, once you complete, I'll give you the exercises to be done. That's all. I'll see you in next lecture. Hello and welcome back. In earlier lecture, you understood clearly about object store, how it works in on-premise, also in Cloud Hub, etc. Now, let us try to understand how this object store is practically used. In what real-time scenarios will this object store be case which I have created. So one of the use case of object stores is caching. It can be used for caching data. How? Let me demonstrate it. Here, I have a flow already created. I have a HTTP listener mapped to /products. And here I have a database select, firing a select query on product table based on the product ID. So I'm expecting the value of this PID from a query parameter called as PID. So once it fires a query, we'll get a result. Then that result, I'm transforming it to JSON, just simply returning the response. Now, if I just run this, I'll be able to actually get a product by ID by making a call. Let us see. Let this be deployed. I'll give a request to localhost 8081/products, and I'll pass PID is equals to 1. So I should get a product with ID 1. Let us wait until the application starts. Okay. Now let us see. I'll give a request. Yep, getting it. But now the thing is, if the same request comes with same product ID, it'll again hit the database. I don't want to hit the database every time. Only for the first time, I want to hit the database. Once I get the product with this ID, I want to store it in a cache so that next time onwards, I will not hit the database. How to implement caching in Mule? Very simple. You want the response of select component to be cached, right? Right click on that, wrap in. You can see there is something called as cache. If you're wrapping something, then such things are called as scopes. I can say that I have wrapped my select component inside a cache scope. Okay, I wrapped inside cache. But now I have to tell what is the strategy for caching. Now what if the incoming product ID, the query parameter product ID, if it is same, then I want to retrieve the data from the cache. So what I can do is I can tell based on which key to store the return value of this select query parameter PID, right? So I have to configure and I have to tell what is the strategy for caching. So see how I'm going to configure. It is very simple. Here, once I click on cache scope, I can select a reference to a strategy. I have to configure a strategy. Okay. So I can give a name. I'll say product strategy. A strategy for my product table. Now it is asking you, okay, that's fine. We will store the data in cache. But for storing data in cache, you need a key to store. What is the key expression? I want the key expression to be the value from query params. Value of PID, I want to use that as a key for caching. So I just have to specify it. Actually, this caching will internally use object store. Okay, so here it is saying there's a warning. Object store is not available and all. So it is asking, consider adding a module, object store module. Okay, I'll just click OK. Then what I will do is I'll click on add modules, drag object store. Fine. Now if I go to this editing this strategy, here you can see that I can configure the object store. Internally, the value for this key will be stored in object store. Here you can see I can configure an object store either inline or I can refer to an existing object store. I'll click on inline. Here I can configure what is the name to my object store. I can say product store. Okay, it is persistent. I can give the values if I want it to be in memory, I want it to be persistent. Fine. That's it. I configured a caching strategy. Now let me run this and see what will happen. Then I'll explain you how this caching is internally working. Fine. I guess I need to redeploy my application right now. I'll just restart it. Okay, the application got deployed. Now let me try to retrieve a product with ID 1. Yes, I got it. So actually, for the first time, whenever I'm giving a request, what will happen? The request will go to cache scope. The cache scope will check. For this cache scope, actually, I've configured a strategy, right? What is the strategy using key? What is the key it is using? PID, query parameter PID. So what is the query parameter value I passed? 1. Okay. So what this cache scope will do, it will retrieve the value of this query parameter and it will check here, right? It will check in this object store. Is there any such key? For the first time, there is no key, right? So the control will come inside. Select query is fired. The return value will be stored in the cache with same key. Fine. Now the response is gone. Second time, whenever I give the same request, the value will go to cache scope. Cache scope will check. Is there a key with same value? 1. Yes. So it will not let the control go inside. The value will be returned from the cache itself. Right. So to prove that the value is coming from the cache, I will just drag and drop a logger. I'll just drag and drop a logger and I'll just configure it inside cache scope. Okay. Anyways, this is a string, so I don't need a dynamic expression. I'm just writing inside cache scope. Fine. The application is already running. I'll stop it. Now, I want everything in the cache. Oh, it is actually redeploying. Let us wait. I want everything in the cache to be clear. As you know, where is cache storing? In object store. You know how to remove from object store. I told you. So right click on the project, run as. You have to select application configure. And then here inside clear application data, by default, it will never clear the application data. I will select prompt. Okay, now apply and run. So once it starts running, Anypoint Studio will prompt me and ask, do you want to clear the application data or object store data? Yes, I will say yes. Let us see. Yep, it is asking, do you want to clear application data? Yes, it will remove from the .mule folder, as I told you in last video. Yes. So it will clear all the object store data. Now freshly the application is starting. Let us wait until it started. Then I'll give a request. For first time, it should go inside this cache scope. Second time, I should not see the log from this logger. Let us wait until it is deployed. Yeah, it is deployed. So I'll try to, first of all, let me clear the cache, clear the logs. Yep, the logs are clean. I'll give a request. Let us see, is there a log inside cache scope? Yes, I'll clear this. Second time, if I give a request, I got the response, but this logger, you don't see that log is executed. So that means right now, the data came from the cache. And you understood that cache is internally using object store, right? It is storing the value of this key inside object store. Fine. That's about a practical use case. Another use case I will tell you. In database module, there is a component called as on table row. let us try to understand how this on table row works and how it is internally using object store for something called as watermarking. Very important in interviews, they will ask about watermarking. I'll explain you what is this watermarking and how watermarking can be achieved using object store. So just see this example. I'll just create a new flow for this, new file for this. I'll write DB polling. Okay, I'll tell you my use case. So in my database, let me open my database, MySQL. Okay. In my database, there is a table called as product table. Now, my scenario is if any new row gets added into this table, I want to get that row and do some processing. This is my requirement. I want to poll the database at regular intervals. Maybe after every 5 seconds, I want to check, is there any new row inserted? If yes, pick it up and do some processing. This is my requirement. So see how I can achieve it. In database module, there is something called as on table row. I'll configure this. I'll drag and drop this. So flow has been started, and in the source there is on table row. I will use the same database config. Fine. Now I have to tell which table it has to poll. Okay, here I have to select the table. My table name is products. I'll go here. It shows all the tables available in MySQL. I'll just select product table. Yes, this is my product table. I'll stop this application firstly because I'm developing right now. Okay, I'll select the table again, products. Okay, product table. I want to poll for this product table. Now, whenever I'm polling, I have to tell how do I identify whether a record is a new one or not. In this case, for my table, product table, I have configured product ID to be auto increment. Let me just show you. I'll right click on this table, alter table. Here, do you see product ID AI is configured, auto increment is configured. That means a product ID will be automatically incremented. So right now, the time is 14:14. I have maximum value of product ID as 6. When I poll for next time, if the product ID is greater than 6, I want to retrieve all such rows, right? So I need to tell to this on table row component what column should be remembered, what value of a column should be remembered. That is called as a watermark column. Okay. So I want to select product underscore ID as watermark. Okay. So if we specify the product underscore ID as watermark column, what will happen? Let me tell you. Before that, let me tell you one more thing. Here, at what frequency you want to poll the database? I want to poll after every fixed frequency of 5 seconds. So if I just configure the scheduling strategy, here the strategy is fixed frequency. And after every fixed 5 seconds, it will go and check with database. Okay, fine. Assume that for the first time, this on table row is firing a query on database. What it will do is it will actually check the value of product ID. Where it will check? Internally, whenever I say watermark, it will be using object store. Internally, it is using object store. Now, whenever this on table row is going to poll the database, first it will try to retrieve the value of this product ID in object store. If it is not present, it will be initialized with 0, the default value. Okay. So What it will do, it will fire a query, select star from product, where product underscore ID greater than 0. So what it will do, it will get 6 records right now, is it? There are 6 records. For initially, when this on table row polls, it will get 6 records, first 6 records. Then what it will do is, for each record, a new mule event is created and rest of the flow is executed. So I just drag and drop a logger here and simply write payload. Drag and drop a transform message component. First of all, convert that payload to JSON and then log it. Okay, now simply listen again without any confusion. I'm going to tell you. I configured this on table row to poll after every 5 seconds. For the first time, assume that it is polling. What it will do is, it will try to get the value for a key, product ID, in the object store. Assume that you are deployed the application right now, the object store is empty. There is no such key. So what this on table row will do is, it will fire a query to retrieve all the products. So it will get 6. Now what? For each record, it will create a mule event and then execute the flow. That means if there are 6 records, how many mule events will be created? 6 mule events will be created, and for each mule event, the flow is triggered. Fine. Then the last or the maximum value of product ID will be stored in object store with same key. What is the key I gave? Watermark column. This is the one. So with same key, it will be stored in object store. So that during next poll, what will happen during next poll after next 5 seconds? It will try to retrieve the products whose product ID is greater than the previous maximum value. So if there are no records, the flow will not be triggered. Only if there are records, for every record, a mule event is created and the flow is triggered. So this on table row will keep on polling the database table at every 5 seconds. And if there are any new rows, for each row, the flow will be triggered. That means after a poll, suppose if there are 10 rows, after polling, assume that there are 10 new rows. Then what this on table row will do? It will create 10 new mule event objects. 10 times the flow is kicked off. Fine. Now you understood about watermark column. What is this ID column? Okay, let's assume that whenever this on table row polled, it got 5 records. Okay, it needs to identify what records are duplicate. There might be duplicate rows in your table sometimes. Wait. Key. Maybe it's possible that there are some tables without primary keys, right? So it is possible that your table may have duplicates. How do I identify the duplicates? There should be at least one column using which you should be able to identify the duplicate. In this case, I'm configuring same product ID as my ID column because that is my primary key, right? So in this case, watermark column and ID column both are same. Okay, I'll tell you a scenario where watermark column and ID column can be different. Okay. Hey, still this on table row is showing an error. Let me check here. What is this on table row? It is DB listener, and what is this saying? Fixed frequency or cron is required. Okay. So actually, this is a very good thing to see. On table row, whenever you are configuring, see it, this scheduled frequency, it automatically again change it to cron. You have to select fixed frequency, and I'll give 5 seconds. Earlier, even though I configured, I didn't click on save. It's a bug in AnyPoint Studio. Sometimes, even though you configured, that may not reflect in XML. Sometimes. See, right now you can see inside DB listener, Scheduled strategy is there, fixed frequency is configured. It is a bug in Anypoint Studio. It is a known issue. Okay, fine. Now, yeah, I configured. Let me test this. I will run this application. I'm selecting clear application data. Yes. For the first time, I'm freshly running it. Let us wait until it is deployed. It got deployed, and you can see on the console, this logger is executed. How many times? This is a logger. Logger got executed how many times? If you see, 1 time, 2 times, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 times for every record. You can see the logger is logging the JSON for 6 records. So that means the flow got executed 6 times, right? Fine. Now I'm not seeing any logs because 5 seconds is over, but there are no new records. I configured 5 seconds, but there are no new records. Is that? So let me go to console, clear the console, go to database, and I will add a new row 7, some data. Apply. I didn't configure this offer valid until. That's okay. Now let us go and check in database after 5 seconds. Yep, I saw that there is a new record which is picked up, right? So right now this on table row is storing the maximum value of this watermark column in the object store. With what key? Key is nothing but the watermark column name, right? Fine. Now think carefully and answer my question. Check with yourself. If I restart this application, do you think it will again fetch the previous records also? If I restart my application, okay, the answer is on table row is internally using object store, and by default the object store is persistent. Okay, and you know where object store data is stored locally, right? If I don't clear the application data, then it will remember in the previous poll what was the maximum value and it will use it. So I'll say no. That means I'm not clearing the application data. I'm not clearing the object store. So it should remember the max value earlier, 7, and it should not reprocess the entire data. Let us wait until it starts. I'll show you that it will not actually reprocess. It will remember. Let us check. Deployed successfully. Now, did I get those logs? No, right? So that means it is polling after every 5 seconds, but there are no new records. So the flow is not triggered. Fine, let me clear. Now what I will do is I will actually restart the application. Let me stop it, restart. But now what I will do is I'll configure it to clear the application data. So let us see now after it is built. Anypoint Studio will prompt me for clearing. Yes, it is now prompting. Now if I say yes, all the object store data will be deleted. That means the value of this column, product ID, which was stored in object store, that also will be deleted. So I should see that it freshly again polls and gets all the previous data. Let us check. Now I can see that on console, I can see the logs again, right? So this proves that watermark column, the max value of watermark column is stored in object store. Now, just listen carefully. Very important thing for certification exam. I see that in certification exam, there are at least 2 questions coming from whatever I'm going to talk right now. Okay. Actually, what all columns can be used as watermark column. Okay. So I will tell you a scenario. Assume that in my database table, assume that there is a field of type timestamp. Normally, I have a rule in my application. Whenever a row is updated or whenever a row is added, the current timestamp on the server will be added here. That means, assume that now I inserted, now the time is 14:28, let us say 10 seconds on my system. 10 seconds and some milliseconds. So assume that I inserted a row. Now, what I want is, I want in the database table, the value of timestamp column will be 12:28:10. Okay. Assume that I have such a column in my database where we are storing a timestamp. Whenever a new row is added or a row is updated, the timestamp will be modified. Fine. Now, what I can do in my flow, I can configure my database on table row to pull this table and fetch the records based on the timestamp. So initially, this on table row will be internally using object store, right? In object store, for this key, let's assume the column name is modified underscore TS. Assume that this is a column name. So what happens is, if I configure this column as my watermark column, for the first time, the object on table row will check in object store. Is there any key with this? No. So what it will do, it will fetch all the records, and then the current fetch time. The current time on the system right now, the time is 14:29. Assume that the current time is 14:29 45 seconds. Whenever it polled, the last poll time is this much. It will be stored in object store. So next time, whenever it polls, what it will do? It will retrieve the columns whose timestamp value, whose value in this column is greater than this one. So will I get only the columns modified after this timestamp? Yes. So in your database table, if there is any such column called as a timestamp column, where you will be storing the timestamp on the server whenever a row is added or modified, etc., then that column also can be used as a watermark column, right? Either this or primary key. So these are the concepts. I can see an exam in certification exam. There are questions where I saw they're asking what are the probable columns which can be used as watermark column. So timestamp column like this is also a probable candidate for watermark. Okay. So that's about how on table row is internally using object store to store the value of watermarked column. This column which we are actually remembering the value of this column we're storing in object store, right? This column, whatever we are remembering, is called as a watermark column. So on table row is using object store to store the watermarked columns. Fine. Hey, internally object store is using, internally on table row is using object store. I just wanted to simulate this behavior of on table row. I want to do custom watermarking. Actually, this on table row is internally doing automatic watermarking. I wanted to achieve the same functionality by doing custom watermarking. How? Okay. What I will do is, I will actually, I don't want this flow to be started whenever my application starts. I'll select this flow and I'll make it as stopped. So that means this flow will be there, but it will not be started. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to poll the database after every 5 seconds. So I can use a component called as scheduler. Okay. Here I can configure the scheduler to actually kick off this flow after every 5 seconds. So I can configure the scheduler, fixed frequency, 5 seconds. So what this scheduler will do simply is it will kick off this flow after every 5 seconds. Okay. Then I want to fire a query on database. No. First of all, what I want to do is I want to actually retrieve. Oh, let me stop this application first. Okay, I want to retrieve from the object store. Okay. What is the key? Key I will give as product underscore ID. I'll try to retrieve the value of this key, product underscore ID. The default value, if there is no such key, I want to give the default value as 0. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire a query on database using select. Okay. One thing, after retrieving, what this retrieve component will do is it will try to retrieve the value of this key from the object store, and the retrieved value will become the payload. I don't want the retrieved value to become the payload to the next component. I want to store the output of retrieving in a variable. You already know. You can go to advanced. Here I can configure a target variable. I want the output of this component to be stored in a target variable. I can give a name, max PID. This is the value. This is a variable name in which I am storing. So if you configure target variable in advanced, actually what this will do, the output of this component will be stored in a variable. Normally what? The output of this component will become the payload. If you don't want that, if you want to store the output of any component in a variable, in advanced tab, I can create this variable. I'm storing it in a variable. Fine. Now, here in this select query, I will fire select star from product where product underscore ID greater than colon PID. Okay, the value for this PID, I'm going to retrieve it from where's dot max PID. So for the first time, what will happen? For the first time, if there is no such key, the default value will be 0. So that is stored in a variable max PID. Then we'll retrieve all products whose product ID greater than 0. We'll get all the products. Fine. Now I will check using a choice router. I'll check when there is a function called as size of in DataWeave. We'll look more into DataWeave next. But size of is a function in DataWeave which will give size of the array. After firing select query, the payload will be an array. See, let's assume that for this query there are no rows. The array size will be 0, but the payload will be of type array. Right? We are checking size of payload. If it is greater than 0, then it will go here. Else it will go here. Once it goes to default, I want to set the payload as, or actually not set the payload. I just want to write a logger as no new records. So if the size of the payload is not greater than 0, that means there are no new records. I'll just log no. Fine. But if there are records, then the control will go here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a transformer to transform the output to JSON. I will write here simply payload. And then I'll just write a logger to log it. The logger will just log payload. Then I want to store the maximum value of that column in object store. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use store component. And in the store, I have to tell the same key. Key is what? Product underscore ID. Using same key, what should be the value max of this? Max is a function. Max of payload dot product underscore ID. So the maximum value of product ID, I'm storing it in this store. Okay. Hey, don't worry if you actually right now, as we didn't go deeper into data view, you might not be knowing what is this max function doing, but it is common sense. You will be able to understand it easily. When we go to data view, you'll understand, right? So now, don't you think that this flow also is simulating this one? Yes. But here, am I not using my custom watermarking? See, in store component, I'm storing the value of key value pair. This is my watermark column, product underscore ID. I'm doing custom watermarking. I'm storing the maximum value of product ID here in my logic. Right, it's my custom logic. So this is how we can do custom watermarking. Let me just start this application and check. Okay, I'll clear the application data entirely. Let it start. Okay, it started. Now you can see the logger has logged for the first time. Second time onwards, you can see the logger is printing no new records after every 5 seconds. Actually, it is firing a query on database and checking, and it is just writing no new records. Suppose if I add a new record, let me go and add 8 something. I'm inserting a row. Let us check. Now after 5 seconds, see, it retrieved the new row, right? So you clearly understood how object store can be used for watermarking. Here I wrote a bigger flow. On table row is having a similar logic in Java. They have written this logic in Java, and they are using automatic watermarking, and we are specifying the watermark column, right? The maximum value of this watermark column is automatically stored in object store. So these are practical use cases of object store. Object store is used for watermarking. So again, the concept of watermarking, I will use it when I'm talking about file module also. There again, we will revisit these concepts. That's all. We are done. There is a lab exercise which you need to do. Go to my GitHub repository. In day 10 folder, there are some documents. Follow the documents and complete the exercise. Please don't lecture until you do this exercise. See you in next day.